We want to welcome all those attendees for this webinar. We will be starting here shortly in about 2 to 3 minutes. Yep, good morning to everybody. We'll be starting our session here soon. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, you're welcome to post them in either the Q&A box or in the chat function. Both of our panelists will be answering questions towards the end of the session. All right, Dr. Elswick, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Rami Lote. I'm with the FedEx Institute of Technology. We're very excited, along with the School of Public Health, to be hosting our second session this fall for our telehealth webinar series. We had a successful launch of the program in June this past summer and had a previous session in September. And I'm hoping we can continue this in the spring. I mean, this has been really great, and looks like there's quite a big demand for it and need for it. We are also very lucky today to have Reverend Jesse Johnson, who I will let introduce himself, or let Dr. Elswick introduce both herself and him. I'm not going to take up any more time. Like I said before, for anyone who's joining in new, if you do have any questions for either of the speakers, please post them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or in the chat box. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can towards the end of the session. But with that being said, I'm going to go into the background, and Dr. Elswick, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate your support. Well, welcome everybody. So glad you're here today. Today we're going to be talking about mindfulness in the classroom and embedding mindfulness moments into that pre-K-12 curriculum, whether it's virtual, which most of us are here in the Shelby County region, teaching in virtual classrooms, or if it's actually in the face-to-face class. This actually can work across both settings. So I am Dr. Elswick. I'm an associate professor at the University of Memphis in the School of Social Work. I have over 16 years of experience in direct clinical practice with children and adolescents, and provide support for school social workers who are moving towards licensure in order to be employed in the state of Tennessee in social work practice. Reverend Jesse Johnson is with us today. He is the director of the No Whispers campaign here in the Memphis region, which is wonderful. Their motto is, "In church, no one should have to whisper about their struggles," which is phenomenal. This movement really is about supporting the mental health and wellness of congregation, and realizing that mental health and mental wellness is not something that we should be hiding from each other, that we really should be supporting each other through that. He has over 20 years of experience working in the field, and I've worked with Reverend Johnson on a number of projects, and so glad to have him today. The way that our programming will work today is we are going to give you some information about what mindfulness looks like in programming, how you would start to implement this in the classroom setting. And then Reverend Johnson is actually going to walk us through quite a few experiential pieces of using mindfulness techniques in practice. So we're going to kind of look at why mindfulness and regulating activities help students, and also how they help teachers and adults and caregivers in the child's life, ways that you can embed that into your pre-K through 12 virtual classroom as well as your live classroom, and then also how to engage learners by using these practices. Now, the different techniques that Reverend Johnson will go over today, we will actually post those scripts. So if you want to utilize those later in your practice, you'll be able to download those from our website. You also can go back and watch this recording at a later time. It will be on the University of Memphis website, where we're hosting all of our telehealth programming. All right, now we'll pass it over to Reverend Johnson.
Good morning, and thank you, Susan. Susan, like she said, Susan and I have worked together on some collaborative projects over the last several years now, and it's always such a privilege to work alongside her. And it is always much more fun to present together than by yourself. Recently, with the start of COVID-19, I started coaching mental health resiliency courses through Zoom, and we experimented with some mindfulness exercises. And my students seemed to find it very helpful. And while I'd still very much prefer face-to-face interactions, I've discovered that there's a lot of virtual possibilities out there than I realized. And because it's such an odd year with COVID-19, why not try some new things? Who knows, I might discover something which I'll want to incorporate in my coaching going forward. In many ways, mindfulness is more relevant than ever. In the midst of our frantic and distracted world, we have, it seems like every minute of the day, we have some technological device reminding us that we have a new message. Mindfulness offers us a sense of calm in the storm and reconnects us to what's really important. Mindfulness, in essence, is the practice of being. If it is doing anything at all, it is slowing down and single tasking. With this context in mind, I would like to invite you to join me in a single task experiment for just a moment. So if you would, please take your finger and place it in the center of your forehead. Close your eyes and simply pay attention to the sensations. Notice what your finger feels like against your forehead. Notice what your forehead feels like against your finger. Bring awareness to the sensations. Notice the temperature, the texture, pressure, moisture, can you feel your pulse? Stay with this for a moment. And if your mind wanders, just notice that and bring your attention slowly back to the sensation of your finger on your forehead. And then open your eyes and notice how you feel. Thank you. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you, Jesse. That was great. I appreciate it. And when we're talking about why is mindfulness needed, I too, just in the midst of everything that's going on, trying to work with my kiddos who are in virtual education and continue my job. And, many, many caregivers are in the same boat. So being able to slow down for a minute is so powerful. And we also know a lot of our children and adolescents in our community here locally are really struggling with high rates of depression, high rates of anxiety, high rates of stress. And so being able to utilize some of these, not only for ourselves as the adult caregiver in the room, but also to try to teach these practices to our students. So let's talk a little bit about what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is paying attention on purpose and without judgment towards yourself or others in the specific environment you're in. It helps us to respond, to not react to specific situations. It is simple, but it is not easy to implement. And I will tell you that I've been utilizing mindfulness in my programming clinically for probably the past 6 years. And when I first started using mindfulness, I had to really practice what I'm preaching. So if I want my clients or the students that I'm working with to use mindfulness techniques, then I need to also practice that in order to be able to teach them better. And so we can be mindful of our senses, and then also be able to think about the thoughts and the emotions that are actually part of that feeling and that sense that we're having. So very similar to what Jesse just walked us through, being aware of the touch, the senses, the feeling, but also being aware that what is my mind doing? What am I thinking about? Am I wandering off? Am I able to bring that back? So when we think about mindfulness, this is why it's really important. Have you ever said something that you wished later on you hadn't said, or been so nervous during a presentation that you couldn't sleep the night before, you were just so amped up? Or you walked into a room to get something and then you totally forgot what you were even in there looking for? That happens to me all the time. Been really sad or upset, but you didn't really know exactly why. You just felt this emotion, but really couldn't connect the dots. Or you've ever been so engrossed in something that everything else fell away and it commanded your full attention and focus, and it may have impacted other things in your life. And I will tell you, this sounds very much like me in many of these situations. And being mindful is something I definitely have to practice on a daily basis. There are times that I might be working on my computer and my child might walk in and immediately go, "Mom, what's wrong?" And nothing's wrong. But I'm so hyper focused on that activity that I'm doing that my facial expression looks stressed or overwhelmed. And so they're picking up on that and I'm not even noticing it because I'm so engrossed in the activity. So it's just being more aware of not only your surroundings, but your own inner emotions, feelings, and senses. So what is mindfulness? It's basically between stimulus and response, there is space. There is space that is a power to change our response. And in our response lies that freedom of making a different choice. So it's really is like Jesse was saying, it's slowing down enough to think before we react, to think about how we feel in that moment before we respond. So I love this graphic. So you have some type of stimulus, and then without mindfulness, you have an immediate reaction. You don't use that space in between to be thoughtful or to think about how you might want to respond. So with mindfulness, it even changes the way we respond to interactions with other people or with the environment itself, or even within our own inner thoughts. So with mindfulness, there's a stimulus, and then we're able to stop long enough to be mindful of how we're feeling in that moment and be able to make a more appropriate choice before we move to that response. So for example, if somebody, maybe I'm at the grocery store and somebody is being really disrespectful or rude, and they push in front of me because they're in a hurry and they're not, they just want to get out of there, and they bump into me. That's the stimulus. I have a moment to decide, am I going to bark back? Am I going to be angry back? I may feel angry, but being mindful, I sit with that anger. Oh gosh, that really made me frustrated. But I sit with it long enough to be able to go, maybe there's something else going on for that person. Yes, that made me angry. I really want to say something, but in response, I do something different. So it's just giving your body the opportunity to acknowledge what you're feeling and experiencing before you make some type of physical reaction to the environment. When we think about the language of mindfulness, things that you might have heard when people are talking about mindfulness is balance, breathing's a huge thing, mindset, stress reduction, reflecting, meditation, being able to forgive, emotional regulation. So this is just kind of a word soup of everything you might have heard from others who are attempting to utilize mindfulness in practice or are talking to you about mindfulness, that there is a lot of language that we hear that all means the same thing. Our greatest gift in being more mindful is utilizing our breath, being able to calm and regulate the way we're breathing, can actually reduce in that moment our levels of stress and our ability to kind of regulate before making a response. I do remember working in a school one time. I had a teacher that was very, very frustrated because her classroom was really overwhelming. She had a lot of high needs in her classroom with behavioral concerns. And she came to me for assistance, but she was so dysregulated and upset, it felt like she was attacking me, when in reality, she wasn't. She was very angry, very overwhelmed, yelling. And so for the moment, in the moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, like she is amping me up. Like, I don't know why she's yelling at me. I'm not the kid acting out in the classroom. But in that moment, I was able to just take a really deep, visible breath that she could see, because I needed to regulate myself. And within that moment of taking that breath, the teacher actually responded in kind. I didn't ask her to. She just saw me take a really deep breath and exhale. And then she did the same. And then we were able to co-regulate enough to kind of talk about what her concerns were, what her needs were, and then move past that to a solution. So your breath is a very powerful tool when we talk about regulating our emotions and our needs. Now, when we think about mindfulness in schools, we have to think about it by building basically a grounding layer. And that grounding layer starts with personal practice. So we start with our own personal practice of using mindfulness. Then we utilize mindful teaching and practice. Then we are able to teach students how to be mindful in the classroom. So this is, again, not one of those things that just happens overnight. As I mentioned, 6 years ago, I started using mindfulness in clinical practice. When I first started, I wasn't practicing it the way I needed to, and it was reflected in my work with clients. If I'm not comfortable in developing my own mindfulness techniques and utilizing them consistently, teaching someone else to do it is very difficult. And so I will tell you that when I first started 6 years ago, it probably took me about 1.5 years to really feel like I was in a space where I was using mindfulness enough to teach it to someone else in practice. So this is not something that just happens overnight. It is, like Jesse said, a way of being. It's a way of being daily, and not just in my teaching, right? It's not just me in my classroom shifting the way that I'm interacting. It's my holistic approach to life shifting. So how is my way of being in the home? How is my way of being driving to and from work? How is my way of being in the classroom? And so it is being and using those mindfulness techniques throughout. So what is mindfulness not? It's not thinking about nothing. Oftentimes people are like, I got to wipe my thoughts clean. I can't have anything in my brain. It's actually the opposite. It's being aware of your thoughts. So in clinical practice, this is a big part of what we do with children when they have a lot of faulty or maladaptive thoughts, and adults do too, right? Maybe I'm about to go and do this presentation, and the reason I can't sleep the night before is because I've got all this negative stuff floating around. You're gonna bomb that presentation. You're not prepared. You're not good enough. So being mindful is being aware, oh, I've got a lot of thoughts happening right now. And that's probably linked to the fact that I'm nervous about my presentation tomorrow. But my sleep is important. So how can I regulate, first understand and acknowledge those emotions and thoughts, and then redirect them in a way to be more healthy in the moment? It's not about being happy all the time. People think, oh, this person that practices mindfulness, they're just happy all the time, and they're always thinking everything's great. That's not true either. It's actually not thinking about emotions as being good or bad. It's about just acknowledging what you're feeling in the moment and being more aware of it. But it's not about being happy all the time. Emotions like anger or frustration or embarrassment are real. And if we don't acknowledge them, then that can cause more problems later on. So it's even being understanding of our own emotional literacy and understanding that sometimes hard emotions, like being angry or sad or embarrassed or frustrated, sometimes dysregulate us. Maybe I don't like to hear a kid cry because I myself don't like to cry. So when a child is dysregulated in your classroom and they are crying, it will dysregulate you. And so being aware of your own internal feelings and emotions about those really big emotions is important. We also want to make sure that we understand that mindfulness is not religious. It's not based in a religion. It can be a secular practice. It's basically a mental training. It's supported by clinical research, and it can be integrated into many different environments. A lot of people want to connect mindfulness to religious-based factors, and that's not the case. Some religious programs utilize mindfulness or meditation, but really it is not affiliated or connected directly to religion. This is important because in my clinical practice and even in my work in schools, oftentimes when I inform caregivers, I'm going to embed mindfulness into what I'm doing. Sometimes the caregivers will say things like, "Oh, no, that's like voodoo. I don't want you to do that." And so part of my job is to educate caregivers about what mindfulness really is. It's not attached to a religion. It's not part of a specific practice. It's just a way of being. And then once you're able to kind of communicate that with the caregiver, they feel less stressed about it. But again, that just goes back to psychoeducation about what mindfulness is and what it is not. It is not long periods of passive sitting or just gazing at a wall with nothing in your brain. It can actually be a very active process. Yoga is a form of mindfulness programming. Having a daily routine, walking, riding a bike, going horseback riding, all of those things can be mindfulness practices. My husband laughs at me because every morning I have a definite routine that I do. Get out of bed, get ready, come down. I set my cuckoo clock, and I don't have to do that. It's just something that I do that gets my day going, and I'm very mindful of it. He also knows if I don't set the cuckoo clock, something's wrong. He'll mention to me, "How are you doing it? Are you doing okay today?" So it's not necessarily passive sitting or not participating in life activities. It's not only living in the present. The present is important, and the whole purpose is you're being mindful enough to be aware of what's going on for you in a moment in time. But it doesn't mean that we're not looking towards the future or analyzing the past. Actually, mindfulness includes both of those. Say, for example, I got into an altercation with a peer at work. After the event is over, I might analyze what is it that I did that may have added to that frustration or added to that issue. What could I have done differently? And then how am I going to change that interaction with this person in the future? That's mindfulness. It's being aware of my emotions and what just happened, how I still feel about that person because of that altercation, and what is that going to look like when I see them next time? So being mindful includes past, present, and future planning. It is not relaxation necessarily. It might feel relaxing, like the exercise Reverend Johnson just did was very nice. Like it helped me to kind of regulate myself in this moment. But we have to realize that it is what is happening in the moment, and it's being with yourself and your emotions and your thoughts. It can be very relaxing, but it is supposed to actually take brain power in order to do and practice mindfulness. It's not zoning out, it's actual purposeful awareness. So I'm not just like zoning out for 30 minutes to try to wipe my brain clean and not think about anything. It is actually contemplating what's happening and being able to think about it in a more reflective and deep way. It is not a classroom discipline model. However, practicing mindfulness in your classroom will actually assist children with regulation because it assists you with regulating. And so that co-regulation is so important. If I am regulated as a caregiver in the classroom, if the child is amped up, but I'm able to stay calm, the child's behavior too will become more calm. So it's about presenting yourself in a way with the child in the moment that can assist them with regulating their emotions and their bodies and their feelings and their experiences. But it's not intended to be like a discipline method. You're not going to use mindfulness because the kids are too loud and crazy in the classroom. Let's practice mindfulness. It's not a discipline technique, but it is something that if we embed it in our daily routines in the classroom can actually benefit greatly, not only the child's ability to regulate, but their ability to learn and gather information. Reverend Johnson?
All right, thank you, Susan. Henry David Thoreau has a wonderful quote that says, "It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see." Our next practice is going to encourage us to be more aware of our surroundings. And if you're watching this on a laptop and you have a window nearby where you can look outside, I invite you to relocate yourself next to that window. I'll give you a moment to do this. And if you're not able to move or don't have a window nearby, that's perfectly fine too. This exercise will work either way. So while those who are moving, who do want to locate, go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and start with take a moment and just to get comfortable in your chair. Feel the firmness of the chair under you. Close your eyes. Inhale a deep breath and hold it for 1, 2, 3, 4, and let it out slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Now open your eyes and take a moment to look around and see what there is to see. Avoid categorizing or labeling what you see. Instead of thinking bird or stop sign or desk or chair, try to notice the colors. Notice the patterns. Notice the textures. Pay attention to the way the light curves around objects. The way the light casts shadows on objects behind it. Be observant, but not critical. Be aware. You're just taking this in. Notice if things are moving or are still. If you become distracted, gently pull your mind away from those thoughts and notice the color or shape again to put you back in the right frame of mind. Notice the many different sizes and shapes and colors that are present in this small slice of the world you can see. Try to see the world from the perspective of someone who is seeing this for the very first time. What would they see? What do you see that you've never noticed before? And now take a deep breath and hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then let it out slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now slowly bring your eyes and attention back to the computer screen. So what did you see that you have never noticed before? Some of you may find that you're having difficulty staying focused, We feel like we're all over the place, and that is quite natural. The idea, of course, is the mind can't stay focused on any of these things for more than a second or two. It's constantly jumping around of its own accord. Sometimes mindfulness is referred to as monkey mind, or in the mindfulness world, this idea of our mind jumping around. And this happens even to mindfulness experts. However, the key is to continually to notice what the mind is doing and then gently bring it back to focus. And with practice, we're able to calm that monkey down and to find ways to concentrate and pay attention for longer periods of time. So thank you and back to you, Susan.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse. So when we think about the benefits of mindfulness for teachers, some of you are experiencing that today in these experientials and being able to practice this in this moment in time. It does overall assist us with improving our focus and awareness, increases our responsiveness to students' needs, promotes emotional balance and stress reduction for us as educators, as professionals, as caregivers. It assists us in supporting healthy relationships at work, not just with the students directly, but even with our peers and colleagues. And many studies have shown that practicing mindfulness not only improves teachers' mental health and well-being, but makes them more effective in the classroom with addressing the needs of the child. Just give one quick example really quickly. Oftentimes in the classroom, you have 30 kids you're managing and monitoring. So sometimes it's hard to pick up on these small cues that children are giving or providing. And sometimes we don't see what's going on until this big explosive behavior occurs. But there's typically some type of precursor behavior that happens before this big explosion. When we become more mindful in the classroom, we're actually capable of picking up on some of those smaller cues we might miss in previous years or in previous class settings when we weren't necessarily focusing on other things outside of what's in our mind. One example is a young kiddo who is extremely aggressive, punches children quite frequently, oftentimes gets kicked out of his school classroom, and always unprovoked from what the teacher can see. There's no real reason or rhyme behind why he's doing what he's doing to these other peers. And so we just decided to kind of sit with the student and try to figure out what is going on and get some more information from the caregivers. And what we find is there's some stressors in the home environment both the kid and the child are struggling with. So mom's working 2 jobs, wonderful mom, very active in his educational life, but her jobs are taking so much from her that she's not able to be present and with her son all the time. So he oftentimes is at home by himself. And the mom is so afraid of him being home by himself because she's got no caregivers to assist. She'll give him recommendations of when you're at home, lock the door. And then go into your room and lock the room and turn your light off so that nobody knows that you're in the house by yourself. Now, mom's just trying to protect kiddo, but what kiddo is starting to get from this experience is maybe the world's not safe, right? And when mom's not here, I'm not safe. And so in order to be safe, I have to protect myself. And to protect myself, sometimes I have to be on high alert. I have to wait for people to be mean to me. And before they can, I'm going to respond and react. So this is kind of the child's background and where he's coming from. And so he already is coming to school hyper aroused, waiting for the next bad thing to happen, waiting for somebody to attack him, when in reality, that may not be what's going on. So after this meeting, the teacher decides, let's kind of monitor what's happening. So it's recess time, one of the times that he really struggles with on the playground. And as he's walking across the playground, the teacher notices he immediately starts to become rigid and he starts to ball his fist up. Now there's no kid around him at this point. He's just walking onto the playground. So she walks over to him and says, "Are you okay? I kind of noticed you look stressed out." And he goes, "That kid over there, he's going to bother me. He's going to mess with me." Now, this is another kid that's not in their classroom, just walking across the playground, not intending to come in direct contact with this child at all. But in his mind, the world's not safe. I'm not safe. I have to protect myself. So he's already ready for a fight when there's not one even in existence to be ready to happen. So the teacher looks at him and says, "You're okay. You're safe. You're not in harm's way here." A couple more times, she notices the balling of the fist and that kind of rigid response. She helps him through the playground, and he goes and engages with the kid he wanted to play with, and beautiful interaction, has no problem with that peer. But it's that sense of him not feeling safe in the moment, and the teacher recognizing that in him, being aware, being present, being with, being able to acknowledge and validate that emotional response, and then also to provide some level of co-regulation for him. So that's just an example that being more mindful in the moment in our practice and education can actually assist not only us with regulation, but assist us with helping other students to regulate because we're more aware of what's happening. We know that the benefits for students, the actually increased attention, focus, and concentration. And what we know from practice, if we've got a kiddo like the one I was just talking about that's super hyper aroused, his brain is constantly focusing on fight, flight, freeze. I've got to keep myself protected. So he's not even able to attend to what you're telling him to do in the classroom. We have to assist that child with reducing that stress level, calming that nervous system down so that he can take in new information and that those pieces of education that we're providing him in the classroom. If the child is stuck, kind of what Reverend Johnson was saying in that monkey brain, if he's stuck and can't calm down enough, then what you're teaching him won't stick. It won't stay with. So really also mindfulness is teaching that nervous system to calm down. It's providing the child a nervous system toolkit, an intervention that can regulate that nervous system so they're prepared for learning. Increased self-awareness for the child, improved like impulse control. They no longer are the kid that just jumps and punches that child for no reason. They're able to stop and analyze how I'm feeling overwhelmed, but my teacher said I'm safe. So I can walk past this kid and not feel like I have to fight so that I can get to the playing that I really want to do. And it increases our empathy. It also increases the child's empathy for the world and people around them. They're able to look at different perspectives. They're able to acknowledge, oh, Johnny looks sad. Maybe I need to assist Johnny with feeling better. How does that make me feel when I see Johnny cry? And so it just increases that level of empathy that we want to see in children. This is definitely a helpful intervention for children who seem to be very hyperactive in the classroom. So children with ADHD, but also the example that I gave, children that have had experiences that are trauma-based, right? And that mom had not done anything negative to that child other than she was trying to live her life and do her job. And in that process, the child started to create these internal templates about not being safe because he didn't have an adult with him in the moment in time when those experiences were happening. So it's not just about ADHD kids. A lot of children that we serve in our environments in schools are struggling with PTSD, high stress responses because of what's going on in their home lives. So really all around, this intervention can benefit many children in your classroom, not just those with diagnosed disabilities or identified disabilities. So when we start thinking about where did mindfulness really originate, actually in the 1970s, mindfulness-based stress reduction was the very first time we really largely heard about mindfulness being used in practice, and it originated out of medical centers, out of hospitals. And actually today, here in our region in Shelby County, Methodist Hospital runs a mindfulness-based stress reduction program. Many times it is free to the community. You can go to their website and look up their schedule. Some of those are being hosted online now because of COVID. And they are continuous, basically support programs that happen like from anywhere from like 6 to 8 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks. And it is just this practice of implementing these interventions in our daily lives and processing our experiences. But these mindfulness-based stress reduction programs were initially used to address stress, overall well-being, chronic pain, to assist people with better immune responses, recovery from addiction, assisting with emotional resilience. It can be used for a number of different factors, but originally it started kind of being utilized in medical programming and hospital settings. Then in the 1990s, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy kind of took hold, and that's where clinicians were starting to implement it and use it in therapeutic practice to treat depression, substance use disorder, relapse prevention. But we also know that it assists with reducing stress, depression, increases self-esteem, decreases anxiety. So it can be also used not just in the medical sense, but also clinically in a therapeutic environment. And then what we found is in the 1980s and a little beyond, educational settings started to utilize mindfulness-based programs in the classroom or as a school-wide program. And they were based on these original mindfulness-based stress reduction curriculum that the hospitals were using, but they were adapted for the educational setting. Now, since that time, now we hear way more about social emotional learning and programming, but it is the same concept. It's that concept of having emotional literacy, of being able to validate our own and others' emotions, being able to understand that emotions are a healthy, natural response, and that if we can be mindful in the way we feel, we can change or alter our responses in certain situations. So that is exactly where social emotional learning derived from. And so we do see mindfulness-based interventions being used in schools. In the early 2000s, a lot of teachers were being trained in mindfulness and starting to implement it in their classroom as a wellness tool or as part of their social emotional learning packages. Now, what we know about the research, in 1983, there were only 3 peer-reviewed publications about mindfulness at all. And then in 2013, there were more than 1,300 research articles that confirm the fact that we know mindfulness works in practice across many different populations and across many different environments. But now mindfulness is such a current practice in clinical programming, medical programming. We're seeing it more and more in schools that really now we're seeing about 40 a month coming out, research that's showing the improvements and impact that mindfulness can have on clients and students, adults, teachers across the board. UCLA even did a specific research study on 2nd and 3rd graders to look at whether or not mindfulness would improve executive functioning. They actually studied 829 students and found that, yes, it was statistically significant improvements in attention, self-care, their mental health and wellness, their ability to participate in class, and then showing empathy for other children. So we talked about that personal practice and how important that is. So once you feel like, okay, I am walking the walk, I am practicing my personal level of development around mindfulness, we need to start thinking about how can we embed that kind of practice in our lives so that we can be more rehearsed, more using it in the moment, not just, oh, I'm going to implement this intervention in the classroom because the research says it's good. In order for me to implement it in the classroom, I have to kind of be living it myself. So that includes things for you like mindful breathing, like the wonderful exercise we just did, mindful listening. So maybe a colleague's coming at you at work and they're really kind of going at you and saying all the things that you're doing wrong, but being able to listen to what's happening and what they're saying and really decode, they're not really angry at me. Just like that teacher, she wasn't angry at me. She was frustrated and overwhelmed about the level of intense needs in her classroom. So being able to mindfully listen to that conversation and to calm myself enough so that I can have a more appropriate response. Body scans are great. And that's where I might just sit for a second because I notice I'm kind of getting amped up. My face is getting flushed. My ears are getting hot. I realize these physiological responses are letting me know I'm anxious, overwhelmed, scared. So being able to do a body scan, where am I holding that intense energy in my body? So being able to stop and go, how does my head feel? Because I often get tension headaches or migraines. And if I stop for a second and evaluate my body scan, I can tell I'm clenching my teeth, right? So something's happening in the moment. I'm feeling overwhelmed. My body responds. I'm clenching my teeth, which leads to a headache. So by using this body scan technique, my headaches have decreased drastically because I'm able to be aware in the moment. There it is. I'm feeling it, right? I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I also realize my body's responding a certain way. And then also finding mindful moments throughout your day. I will tell you, mindful moments for me do not happen with washing the dishes. That's not my mindful moment time. My mindful moments happen to be in the car ride from home to work, or when I've just pulled a student from a classroom to see them for therapy, and I've walked them back to the class. The time it takes me from walking to the child's classroom back to my office, that's my mindful moment. So these things don't have to be like 30-minute chunks of your time. It can be any small transition that you may have that you can use in your day to embed more mindful practices. There are some really great free guides and downloads available at the link here from the Center of Mindfulness that you can use in your daily practice. Also, I love to listen to guided relaxation recordings. I also enjoy really just sitting on my porch and listening to the sounds of nature or listening to soft music. Those specific things assist me with being more present in the moment. So once we've gotten our personal practice down, and like I mentioned to you, it took me about 1.5 years to really feel like I was practicing it at a level that I knew enough about it that I could use it in practice. So once that personal practice is in place, then we're going to move to mindful teaching. And mindful teaching is being an educator that is attuned to mindfulness practices in the classroom, or attuned to the students' needs in the classroom. And so when we think about teaching mindfully, that's the foundation for teaching mindfully, is always our own mindfulness practice. So again, I can't tell a child to do something that I am not modeling or that I am not displaying in my own behavior and emotional regulation. Children learn to regulate through their caregivers. And so if I can't practice mindfulness in the moment, the child and student that I'm serving will really struggle with that as well. So mindfulness for teachers, there's a lot of research on this. A 2013 study that was done looking at Healthy Minds, which was a curriculum used for teachers to teach them mindfulness-based practices, found that the modified mindfulness-based stress reduction program that they were in reduced burnout and symptoms of both psychological and like physiological signs of burnout in the teacher. It improved their classroom organization and increase their effectiveness in teaching specific things in the classroom. It increased their own self-compassion, not just for the students, but for their colleagues and for the other staff in the building. And it actually reduced attentional bias. So, and this does happen, and it's unconscious. If there is a kid in your classroom who, for whatever reason, really dysregulates you, oftentimes that kid will be your point of always focusing on what he's doing wrong. Okay, well, Johnny acted out in class today. Okay, he talked out 3 times, he punched a kid. But we forget to find those times where Johnny's doing things right, because our attentional bias is that he's always dysregulated, he's always acting out. When I'm around him, he amps me up. And so being able to do some co-regulation around that will assist you with seeing what are Johnny's strengths that he brings to the table. Also, they investigated looking at phases of first-year teachers. What we know from research is currently many teachers don't last 2 to 3 years, new teachers. They graduate, they come out of their programming, they're ready to go, but within about the 3rd year of their professional lives, they're overwhelmed and stressed out, and they no longer want to be a teacher. So this love that they had, they went to school for to help students and be part of that process, no longer feels good any longer. And so what they looked at is that anticipation of starting my profession. Then I get into this like kind of survival mode. Like, I don't know what is happening. I just want this year to hurry up and be over. Then a sense of disillusionment. And then they go into this rejuvenation stage, reflection, and then anticipation. So if we can assist teachers by utilizing specific techniques that are going to help them feel more grounded, help them feel more hopeful about the future, give them some tools and some interventions to address the needs in the classroom, then we have a teacher that wants to stick around because they feel more in control, not only of themselves, but of their classroom environment. And so qualities of a mindful teacher, they're compassionate, understanding. They do have boundaries. Sometimes people think teachers that use mindfulness are just kind of like, whatever you want to do, I'll let you do it. That's not true. Having boundaries in your classroom is very important, but it's putting those boundaries in place in an empathic, compassionate, supportive, and reflective way. It's having good attention and being attuned to what's going on in the classroom, and then also being authentic. And that kind of goes back to if I'm not practicing mindfulness, but I'm telling you, you need to practice it, that's not being very authentic in the moment. So mindful teaching involves several components. So personal practice is the basis for that, me practicing it for myself. Embodied teaching means being attuned to the presence and being able to be aware and responsive to many needs in the classroom, including my own. And then relational mindfulness. And it does draw from neuroscience, being able to regulate your nervous system. then assist you with regulating this kiddo's nervous system. It also takes into fact biology, physiology, positive psychology, and it embeds mindfulness in all of those pieces. So when we think about mindful teaching, what we kind of ask ourselves is, what is the condition of the teacher's nervous system when they're in the classroom? Is the teacher always hyper aroused, like the kiddo we talked about on the playground? Are they always activated and stressed? If that's the case, our classroom will look that way. Are they present, attuned, empathic? Because if those pieces aren't present, then children aren't necessarily learning those skills from us. And then we may have a classroom that's not attuned or present during a lecture or an activity, and then may not be showing a lot of empathy or compassion for one another. And if we are seeing signs of burnout, fatigue, anxiousness, levels of stress being increased in the classroom, then our job is to assist that teacher. And I will say schools are doing a much better job about how do we support the teacher and decrease the teacher's level of stress so they can be more productive. Some of the schools I'm working with are doing great things like putting wellness rooms in their buildings, giving mindfulness spaces, giving an opportunity for teachers to definitely take your break. If it's your lunch break, you take that because you need your lunch break, not working through lunches or having meetings during break times. So we are seeing a shift happen. It might be slow, but we are seeing a shift occur. Mindfulness and teaching embodies what your voice sounds like, your posture, your facial expressions, how active you are and how calm you are at certain times, because this classroom doesn't need to be so calm everybody's falling asleep, right? We need to have some energy and some activity. And remember, mindfulness is not about being still necessarily. It can be an active process as well. Your energy level will be reflected in the energy level of the students in the classroom, and how authentic you are in your relationships is super important to kids. If they don't feel like you really care about them, they will not display that same level of respect back to you. So once we've understand how we do personal practice, how we become a mindful teacher in the moment, then we can move to teaching mindfulness to the students. There are a number of mindfulness-based curriculum for K through 12. We will give a list of some of those at the end of the presentation that you can look up at a later time. But usually they last about 8 to 16 weeks, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes it's maybe 20 weeks. And that's great to embed a curriculum. And I love that concept. But being mindful in the classroom goes beyond just a scripted curriculum. It means that we're practicing mindfulness during transitions during our day, after morning meeting, before we release for the day and everybody goes home for the evening. And so I definitely encourage curriculum-based interventions because it gets you started. But mindfulness-based programming and teaching that to students starts also with just building it into our daily routines. The two most important things about teaching mindfulness in your classroom is your personal practice. As I said, that is the key foundation for this. And that the mindfulness instructor can make the lesson their own. So maybe you buy this 8 to 12 week curriculum and you're like, I like parts of it, but not all of it. Make it your own. Embed your own practices that you use at home. Share with them your breathing techniques that you found to be helpful. So that's how children really learn, because they're learning from your practice and your presence, and your actually showing them how you do it in your home environment, during the day, after school. And remember, mindfulness is an invitation. We're not forcing children to participate in this. What will happen is you'll have some kids that don't feel really regulated in it. They don't want to close their eyes. They don't want to sit down when everybody else is sitting down. If you continue to model that and make it part of your routine, they will. They will learn to automatically co-regulate. It may take a couple of weeks. But we also have to kind of be aware that some of those responses may be based in trauma. Why a child might not want to close their eyes. Well, I'm not sure what will happen if I close my eyes. So you're asking me to do something that already hyper arouses me. So it almost makes it like I can't calm down. So you might even say, if you feel comfortable enough to close your eyes, feel free to do that. If you don't, you can make a soft gaze or stare at something in front of you to kind of give your eyes a place to land. Also being aware that when we're in a classroom, kids are super self-conscious of who's looking at me while I'm doing this. So in the classroom setting, you can make it more inviting by saying, everybody turn your seats back to back. That way nobody's staring at each other. In a virtual platform, you could just indicate, why don't we turn our cameras off for a few seconds? And we're going to go through this guided imagery piece. Okay. So teaching mindfulness, you need to explain to the children why we're doing it. It's going to be a set of life skills they can take with them. It's going to help them with regulating. We're going to experiment in the classroom with seeing how this helps you to be a better listener, be able to be more attuned, be able to be a more compassionate friend. But we do have to explain why we are embedding that in our programming and give them a reason why. And then we start to do the direct instruction. A lot of times direct instruction, 15 minutes or less, is about what the purpose of this this intervention is, why we're doing it, and to actually get them settled enough to start that specific process. But as I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be this 15-minute chunk of time only, right? You could do it that way as part of the curriculum, because a lot of curriculum are 15, 20 minutes long. But embedding it into the classroom routines is so important. Okay, Reverend John.
Thank you, Susan. Those are all great advice there. Our next practice is a guided imagery exercise that I call the secret garden. And so if you would, I invite you to close your eyes, allow yourself to get comfortable. Begin with a few slow, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth, letting your body get relaxed. Let the chair fully support your body as you continue to breathe and relax. Now use your imagination to picture yourselves walking slowly along a path. It is a pleasant path, any kind you wish. It's a beautiful day and you feel relaxed and happy. You can feel the warmth and energy of the sunlight on your skin. Soon you come to a gate. You know this gate leads to a special place where you'll feel welcomed, safe, and comfortable. Push the gate open and allow yourself to enter your own private garden. Your garden is filled with your favorite things. Perhaps there are flowers, trees, animals, birds, water, or even music. Look around and notice what's in your garden. See all the colors and objects that are in this place. Notice how beautiful they are. Look at the various shapes and see how varied they are. Look at the ground. Look at the sky and see where they meet. Your garden is calm and tranquil. Everything peacefully coexists in the garden. As you are looking, become aware of how things might feel in this private place of yours. Explore this place with your sense of touch. Perhaps some things are soft and warm, and others are cool and smooth. Simply spend some time exploring, using your sense of touch as you continue to feel at peace and comfortable. Notice what the air feels like. Is it cool or warm? Is there a breeze Or is it still? Take the time to feel the peace and serenity in this private place. As you continue to explore your garden by seeing and feeling, become aware of the sounds that you hear in your garden. The sounds in your garden are pleasant to the ear and very comforting. Perhaps it is quiet in your garden, or maybe there's a number of sounds. Some of the sounds may be very soft, while others may be louder. Listen and relax for a while and see if you can identify the different sounds in your garden. As you're listening to the sounds in your garden, become aware of the smells you might smell. Take a deep breath in and notice the fragrances that are present. Some may be familiar, while others may be unfamiliar. The fragrances are pleasant and soothing. Take time to enjoy or visit your garden, using it whenever way you wish. Spend the time that is necessary for you to rejuvenate and take care of yourself. And then when you're ready to leave, slowly walk back towards the gate of your garden. You have enjoyed your visit to the garden and feel relaxed and content. This good feeling will remain with you throughout the day. Push the gate open and return to the path that led you to the garden. As you make your way back to the path, to the here and now, remember that you can use your imagination to return to your private garden at any time you wish. Visit your garden anytime you would like to be relaxed, to be comforted, or just to enjoy its beauty. You are now ready to resume your day. Stretch gently, open your eyes, feeling refreshed and alert. Thank you. You can go on to the next slide. So how did that make you feel? Some of you may be asking the question, is guided imagery a part of mindfulness? And how are the two similar or different? And in my opinion, the short answer is that the two bring about many of the same results: a sense of calm, deeper awareness, groundedness. It's just the process of getting there that's different. There's been a lot more research done on mindfulness meditation than in guided imagery. But still, like I said, the outcomes on stress and performance, depression, pain and anxiety, and qualities of life appear to be comparable from what I've seen. In my opinion, the advantages of mindfulness meditation is what happens over time. It can have a calming effect. You're more present. You feel more grounded, and you're less at the whim of people and external situations and events. Your ability to improve, ability to focus and concentrate improves. And as you become more aware of your body, your early warning system for problems and symptoms becomes strengthened. So you're better able to notice when something isn't working correctly and get it looked at and taken care of. And in my experience, steady, disciplined practice makes most people stronger, braver, smarter, better employees, better teachers, better social workers, better pastors, better citizens, etc. And so guided imagery, on the other hand, requires less discipline and practice. in essence, you hit the play button and focus on the voice and the music and the evocative language and images, and it kind of carries you. And that's why it's sometimes called the lazy person's meditation. The voice and images may in fact take you inside of your own inner experience, the way mindfulness does, but it can also provide a more goal directed, structured kind of imagination storyboard narrative of what you're hoping to achieve. So a certain desired end state, like more confidence, less pain, successful medical procedure, reduction of anxiety, or a smooth and stellar athletic performance, and so on. And because it is easier and takes less focus and discipline, guided imagery might be easier for beginners. And then once they've had a good experience, you can move on to other mindfulness exercises. So really, there's no silver bullet for everyone. One prefer one over the other. Some people do both. One of the really cool aspects of guided imagery, especially for, I think, the classroom, is that it can really help develop a student's imagination. Students can then integrate what they're learning into their guided imagery experience. So, for example, say you're studying the ocean. You can then have them imagine that they're going underwater in an underwater vehicle, and they can cruise through the ocean depths looking for fish and animals and plants. Then you could end the guided relaxation with a few deep breaths as their underwater vehicle surfaces. Or you could, and then they could draw or discuss whatever they saw when they were underwater. You could all take them on pretend journeys to outer space, or deserted island, or safari, or you could explore the inside of a volcano. So the possibilities are really endless. So just to kind of go over it now, Susan already hit these, but just the next slide. Some tips to getting started. Here are 7 tips, and like I said, Susan already hit all these, but this is all of them, or a bunch of them, all in one place. Manage expectations. Kids are noisy, squirmy, and messy, and that's really okay. Let kids be kids. Support their laughter and play, and the stillness will come. The last thing we want to do is for them to associate mindfulness with a chore or boring or something that they have to achieve. If the kids see that you're chill about it, then the kids will be chill about it too. Secondly, attempt to eliminate distractions. Turn off the TV or other background noises. Encourage the students to put their phones on silent mode. And in my opinion, the process of preparing a distraction-free space is just as important as the mindfulness exercise itself. Because we live in such a world with so much technology and everything going off and so many extra things, just the practice of actually creating a space that's quiet can have huge benefits. Third one, keep it short and lighthearted. In the beginning, I recommend just keeping it to a couple minute session. And over time, as your students have good experiences, you can build up to longer times. Work on building routines. Susan said a lot about this. Consistency is really the key to long-term success in almost everything. If you decide to practice mindfulness at the beginning of the class, for example, try to do it at the same time every day, if possible. If you practice it before a test, try to make that a regular routine. If children are more apt to participate and gain the benefits of mindfulness if they see it as something a part of their routine. And Susan said it before, feel free to experiment, just have fun with it. You're going to make some mistakes, and that's perfectly natural. Just laugh about it and try again. And you're going to discover, a new tool or some new techniques that will be invaluable for you going forward. Also, explain the benefits. Students are practical. Show them how mindfulness can help reduce stress and anxiety and improve concentration and focus. Show them how mindfulness could help them in a real life situation. Susan talked about the example of, somebody in Walmart, cutting you off or something. And so maybe a student, next time they get actually pushed on the playground, instead of choosing to retaliate, they could choose to take a few deep breaths and control their anger and find a different situation. Maybe have them practice before a test and see if it improves their concentration. So, there's all sorts of ways to experiment and help them to kind of get excited about it and trying this out. And then lastly, as we've said over and over again, Susan mentioned this, model it yourself. You can only go so far if you aren't practicing what you teach. If you show greater calm in situations, your kids will pick up on that and they'll be more likely to embrace it too. So thank you. Back to you, Susan.
Thanks, Jesse. Well, excellent. So I know we're over time. Thank you so much for spending time with us. These are just last few slides, give you a few additional resources, tools, and tips. This PowerPoint will be available for you to download on our website, where the recording will also be posted in additional handouts. This is our contact information, and I do want to take a quick second. I think we had 1 or 2 chats come in. All right, so it looks like nobody had any specific questions. We just want to thank you guys for your time. If you do have questions, our contact information is on the last slide, so feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd be happy to connect on how's it going doing mindfulness in your classrooms, in the virtual space, or just if you have general questions. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.